The morning in London was bright and busy. Cars filled the roads as people hurried to work. Shops opened their doors, and buses moved through the city. Daniel Carter drove carefully through the traffic. At 36, Daniel was a single father and an executive driver. His 8-year-old daughter, Emily, was the most important person in his life. Daniel had never had an easy life. After losing his wife several years earlier, he had learned how to become both a father and a mother to his little girl. He worked long hours, saved every penny he could, and never complained. His employer was Victoria Hale, the 38-year-old CEO of Hale International. Victoria was one of London's most successful businesswomen. She was confident, intelligent, and extremely demanding. Employees respected her. Some were even afraid of her. But Daniel had worked with her for 3 years. He knew that behind her expensive suits and powerful reputation was a woman carrying far more pressure than anyone realized. That morning, Victoria was already waiting outside the company headquarters. "You're late." Daniel checked his watch. 3 minutes. Victoria gave him a cold look. 3 minutes can change everything. Daniel smiled slightly. "Apparently, today I'm learning that lesson." Victoria didn't smile. "Let's go." Daniel opened the car door for her. She stepped inside, and Daniel took his place behind the wheel. The first 10 minutes were completely normal. Then Victoria's phone rang. She answered immediately. "What do you mean the investors changed their decision?" Daniel continued driving. Victoria listened carefully. "Who showed them the financial report?" She suddenly became silent. Her expression changed. Daniel noticed it through the mirror. "Everything all right?" "Just drive." Daniel said nothing. A few minutes later, Victoria suddenly pointed toward a side road. "Turn right." Daniel slowed down. "That road." "Yes. There's usually heavy traffic there." "I know." Daniel turned. Victoria kept looking at her phone. Then she received another message. Her face became tense. "Stop." Daniel immediately pressed the brakes. "What happened?" "Go back." Daniel looked over his shoulder. "We've already passed the junction." "Then turn around." Daniel frowned. "There's a vehicle coming." "Daniel, do it." He waited for a safe opening. Then he began turning the car. At that exact moment, a delivery van came around the corner. Daniel reacted quickly. He pressed the brakes. The company car swerved. The tires screeched. Then the vehicle slammed into a concrete barrier. Crash! The airbags exploded. For several seconds, everything was silent. Daniel's shoulder hurt. His hands were shaking. But he immediately turned toward Victoria. "Are you okay?" Victoria slowly opened her eyes. "I'm fine." Daniel released his seatbelt. "Stay inside." He climbed out and checked the other vehicle. The delivery driver was shaken but conscious. Daniel helped him out. Within minutes, police and paramedics arrived. An officer approached Daniel. "Who was driving?" "I was." "Tell me what happened." Daniel took a breath. "She told me to turn around. A van appeared, and I tried to avoid it." The officer nodded. "Your passenger gave a different account." Daniel looked toward Victoria. She was standing beside the car. Her forehead had a small cut. She looked at him. Then she said something Daniel never expected. He was driving too fast. Daniel stared at her. "What?" Victoria continued. "I told him to slow down, but he accelerated." Daniel's face hardened. "That's not true." The officer raised his hand. "Both of you will give separate statements." Daniel gave his statement. He explained everything exactly as it happened. But there was no clear camera footage showing the moment of the collision. The delivery driver couldn't remember the exact sequence. And Victoria was the CEO. Daniel was her driver. People naturally assumed the driver was responsible. By the afternoon, Daniel's name was already being discussed inside the company. Then came the meeting. Victoria sat at the head of the table. A company lawyer placed a document in front of Daniel. "Until the investigation is completed, your employment is suspended." Daniel stared at the paper. "You're suspending me?" Victoria didn't answer. Daniel looked directly at her. "You know I didn't cause that crash." Victoria's expression remained cold. "I know what happened from my perspective." Daniel slowly stood. "Your perspective?" He shook his head. You told me to turn around. The lawyer interrupted. Mr. Carter, this meeting is not an argument. Daniel looked at Victoria one final time. I drove you safely for 3 years. Victoria remained silent. Daniel picked up the document. And you chose to blame me. He walked out. Outside the building, Daniel sat on a bench. He thought about Emily, his daughter's school fees, their home, their bills. His entire life depended on his job. But he was more worried about something else. He couldn't understand why Victoria had lied. She had been sitting beside him. She knew exactly what happened. Daniel returned home that afternoon. Emily immediately ran toward him. Dad. Daniel smiled. Hey, sweetheart. She looked at his injured shoulder. What happened? Small accident. Emily narrowed her eyes. That doesn't look small. Daniel laughed softly. Your dad is tougher than he looks. She hugged him. I was worried. I know. That evening, Daniel checked his work bag. Something strange caught his attention. A small black device was inside. He recognized it immediately. It was a vehicle's accident data recorder. Daniel stared at it. The damaged company car had been taken away after the crash. Someone must have removed the recorder. But why had it ended up in his bag? He connected it to his laptop. A file appeared. Accident data, 10:42 a.m. Daniel opened it. His eyes widened. The data showed the vehicle's steering direction. It showed the speed. And most importantly, it showed that the car had not accelerated before the crash. Daniel leaned closer to the screen. There was more. The vehicle had received a manual steering command just seconds before the collision. Daniel knew immediately what that meant. Someone had changed the car's direction, and he hadn't done it. Then Daniel noticed the name attached to the command. His face went pale. The command had been issued from the passenger side control system. Victoria's side. Daniel sat completely still. The woman who had blamed him had unknowingly left behind the evidence that could destroy her entire story. But Daniel didn't know why she had done it. And he didn't know that Victoria was already searching her office for the same evidence. Because Victoria had a secret of her own. She hadn't blamed Daniel because she wanted to save her reputation. She had blamed him because someone had threatened her. And the threat was connected to a business deal worth hundreds of millions of pounds. The next morning, Daniel would receive a phone call that would completely change his understanding of the crash. And Victoria would finally learn that the single father she had sacrificed to protect herself might be the only person capable of saving her company. The next morning began with bright sunshine over London. Daniel had barely slept. The accident data recorder was still on his kitchen table. He had checked the information several times. Every time, the same conclusion appeared. The car had not accelerated. The steering direction had been changed from the passenger side, and that meant Victoria had not told the truth. Daniel wanted an explanation, but before he could decide what to do, his phone rang. The call was unknown. Daniel answered. Hello. A man's voice spoke calmly. You found the vehicle data. Daniel froze. Who is this? Someone who knows what happened. Daniel looked toward the window. What do you want? Nothing. Then why call me? Because you're about to lose everything for something you didn't do. Daniel tightened his grip on the phone. Tell me who you are. The caller ignored the question. Don't give that data to Victoria. The call ended. Daniel stared at his phone. For several seconds, he didn't move. Then Emily walked into the kitchen. Dad. Daniel quickly put the phone down. Morning, sweetheart. Are you okay? I'm fine. Emily looked at him carefully. You always say that when you're not. Daniel smiled. Breakfast? She nodded. Daniel knew he couldn't involve his daughter. Whatever was happening at Hale International was becoming much bigger than a simple car accident. Across London, Victoria Hale was sitting in her office. Her legal team had placed several documents in front of her. The insurance company wants the driver's statement. Victoria stared at the paperwork. And the police? They're waiting for the vehicle examination. Victoria's expression tightened. How long? Probably another day. She stood and walked toward the window. For the first time in years, Victoria didn't know what decision to make. She had blamed Daniel. She knew it was wrong, but she believed she had no choice. 2 days before the accident, Victoria had discovered that someone inside her company was transferring confidential information to a competitor. The information involved a massive property development. If the leak became public, Hale International could lose hundreds of millions of pounds. Victoria had confronted one of the senior executives. He had responded with a threat. He told her that if she exposed him, he would release evidence that could destroy her family. Victoria had panicked. Then came the crash. The crash wasn't supposed to happen. Victoria had made one reckless decision. She had reached toward the passenger controls to change the route. She hadn't realized how quickly the vehicle would respond. When the collision happened, she knew she had caused it, but she was terrified. So she blamed Daniel. It was the worst decision of her life. And now the truth was beginning to catch up with her. A knock came at her office door. Her chief financial officer, Marcus Reed, walked inside. "You wanted to see me?" Victoria looked at him. "Where were you yesterday morning?" Marcus smiled. "At the office." "All morning." "Of course." Victoria studied his face. Something felt wrong. Marcus placed a folder on her desk. "The investors' meeting is still scheduled." Victoria opened it. "The board is already concerned about the accident." Marcus leaned closer. "You need to control the story." Victoria looked at him. "Meaning?" "Keep the blame on the driver." Her eyes narrowed. "You seem very interested in Daniel." Marcus shrugged. "He's responsible." Victoria said nothing. Marcus left. The moment the door closed, Victoria opened a drawer. Inside was a small envelope. She removed a photograph. It showed Daniel with Emily. The picture had been taken several months earlier at a company charity event. Victoria stared at it. She remembered something she had never told Daniel. Years before she became CEO, Victoria's younger brother had been involved in a serious financial dispute. He had nearly lost everything. Someone had quietly helped him. That person was Daniel. Victoria had never forgotten. Daniel had no idea, and that was the reason her guilt felt even worse. She had betrayed a man who had once helped her family without asking for anything. Meanwhile, Daniel decided he needed answers. He returned to the location of the crash. It was daylight. The road was busy again. Daniel studied the barrier. He noticed a small traffic camera across the street. He approached the nearby shop. "Excuse me." The shopkeeper looked up. "Yes. I was involved in the accident here 2 days ago." The man nodded. "I remember." "Do you have CCTV?" The shopkeeper hesitated. "Why?" "I need to prove I wasn't responsible." The shopkeeper looked at Daniel for a moment. Then he pointed toward the back room. "I might have something." Daniel followed him. A monitor displayed several camera feeds. The shopkeeper searched through the recordings. Then he stopped. "There." Daniel leaned closer. The camera didn't show the entire crash, but it showed the company car approaching the junction, and it showed something else. Just before the car turned, Victoria's arm moved. Daniel stared at the screen. "Can you give me a copy?" The shopkeeper nodded. "I can." Daniel thanked him. Now, he had 2 pieces of evidence: the vehicle data and the CCTV footage. But he still didn't understand why Victoria had done it. His phone rang again. This time it was Victoria. Daniel almost didn't answer. Finally, he did. "Hello, can we talk?" Daniel looked at the screen. "About what?" "The accident." Daniel's voice became cold. "I think we already talked about that. I made a mistake." Daniel went silent. Victoria continued. "I need to explain. You blame me. I know. You could have destroyed my career. I know." Daniel's anger grew. "Why?" Victoria didn't answer immediately. "Please meet me." Daniel almost refused. Then he remembered the mysterious caller. He agreed. They met at a quiet cafe during the afternoon. Victoria arrived without her usual team. No lawyers, no assistants, just her. Daniel sat across from her. Victoria looked different, less like a CEO, more like a tired woman who had finally reached the end of her strength. "I caused the crash," she said. Daniel stared at her. "I know." Victoria looked shocked. "You know?" Daniel placed a vehicle data recorder on the table. "I found this." Victoria's face went pale. You weren't supposed to have that. Who said that? She didn't answer. Daniel leaned forward. Victoria, tell me the truth. She looked down. I was trying to stop a business disaster. By blaming me? I panicked. Daniel shook his head. That's not an excuse. I know. For the first time, Victoria's voice broke. I was scared. Daniel remained silent. Victoria explained everything. The leaked company information, the threat, the pressure from the board, the fear that her company would collapse. Daniel listened. When she finished, he asked one question. Who threatened you? Victoria looked at him. Marcus Reed. Daniel immediately recognized the name. Your CFO? She nodded. He has been moving company money through hidden accounts. Daniel stared at her. And the crash? Marcus had arranged for the vehicle's control system to be tampered with. Victoria explained. He wanted to create a scandal. He wanted Victoria removed as CEO. Victoria had discovered part of his plan and panicked. She had accidentally caused the crash while trying to change the route. Then Marcus convinced her to blame Daniel. Daniel sat back. So you made me the perfect scapegoat. Victoria nodded. I'm sorry. Daniel looked away. He wanted to be furious. And he was, but something didn't make sense. If Marcus planned this, why would he want a car to crash? Victoria answered quietly. Because he wanted access to the company's insurance investigation. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What? Victoria explained that Marcus had been preparing to trigger a corporate insurance claim. The crash was supposed to create a financial distraction. During the investigation, he planned to move millions of pounds through several company accounts. Daniel looked at the evidence. Suddenly, the accident made sense. But then his phone vibrated. It was a message from the unknown number. Don't trust Victoria. She hasn't told you everything. Daniel looked at Victoria. She noticed his expression. What happened? Daniel showed her the message. Victoria's face changed. I didn't send that. I know. Daniel stood. Then someone is watching both of us. Victoria looked around the cafe. For the first time, they realized something important. They were no longer enemies. They were targets. Daniel collected the evidence. Victoria stood. Will you help me? Daniel looked at her. You blame me? I know. You almost cost me my job. I know. Daniel took a long breath. But if Marcus is stealing from your company, he could hurt hundreds of employees. Victoria nodded. Daniel finally said, I'll help. Victoria looked relieved. But Daniel wasn't finished. Not because I forgive you. She nodded. I understand. Because innocent people shouldn't pay for someone else's crimes. Victoria looked at him differently. For the first time, she saw Daniel not as an employee, not as a driver, but as a man with stronger principles than most of the people sitting around her boardroom table. They returned to Hale International together. Daniel carried the evidence. Victoria carried the guilt. They believed they finally understood the situation. But when they entered the company building, the receptionist stopped them. Mr. Carter? Daniel turned. Yes. There was a package delivered for you. He took the envelope. There was no sender. Daniel opened it. Inside was a single photograph. His daughter, Emily, was standing outside her school. The picture had been taken that morning. Daniel's blood ran cold. Someone had been watching his child. Victoria immediately understood the danger. Daniel, he looked at her. His expression had completely changed. Now this is personal. And neither of them realized that the photograph contained one more clue. In the background stood a man wearing a Hale International security jacket. The same man had been present near the crash. And he wasn't Marcus Reed. The afternoon sun was still shining over London when Daniel and Victoria returned to Hale International. Neither of them spoke in the lift. Daniel kept looking at the photograph of Emily. Victoria watched him carefully. She could see the anger in his face. But beneath the anger was fear. Not fear for himself. Fear for his daughter. When the lift doors opened, Daniel walked straight toward the security office. Victoria followed. The head of security stood up immediately. Mr. Carter? Daniel placed the photograph on the desk. Who is this man? The security chief looked at the picture. His expression changed. I know him. Daniel stepped closer. Name! Oliver Grant. Victoria frowned. He's one of our security supervisors. Daniel pointed toward the photograph. He was near my daughter's school. The security chief became uncomfortable. That doesn't prove he was following her. Daniel looked at him. Then find out why he was there. The security chief checked the employee records. Oliver Grant had worked for Hale International for nearly 7 years. His record looked perfect. No complaints. No warnings. No suspicious activity. But Daniel noticed something. Oliver had access to company vehicles. He also had access to security cameras. And most importantly, he had access to the crash investigation files. Victoria looked at Daniel. This can't be a coincidence. Daniel nodded. They searched the security records. Then they found something. Oliver had entered the vehicle storage area on the morning of the crash. The timestamp was only 20 minutes before Victoria and Daniel left the company headquarters. Daniel stared at the screen. What was he doing there? The security chief didn't know. Victoria immediately called Oliver. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Then an employee rushed into the office. Ms. Hale. Victoria turned. What? The police just called. Her expression tightened. What happened? The vehicle data recorder has been reported missing. Daniel looked at Victoria. Of course. Someone had discovered they had the evidence. The police arrived shortly afterward. Daniel gave them the CCTV footage. Victoria provided the company records. The investigation changed immediately. The police no longer treated Daniel as the person responsible for the crash. They began examining the possibility of corporate interference. Marcus Reed was questioned. He denied everything. I had nothing to do with the accident. The detective placed several documents on the table, then explained these transfers. Marcus looked at the papers. His confidence disappeared. Millions of pounds had moved between company accounts. Several transactions had been authorized using his credentials. Marcus shook his head. Someone used my account. The detective looked at him. Who? Marcus didn't answer. Then the door opened. Oliver Grant walked inside. Marcus looked at him. For 1 second, neither man spoke. Daniel immediately noticed the reaction. Oliver looked nervous. The detective asked him to sit. Where were you on the morning of the crash? Oliver answered, At work. Where exactly? Security office. Daniel placed a photograph on the table. You were outside my daughter's school yesterday. Oliver looked at it. I was checking security issue. What security issue? Oliver hesitated. There was a report of a suspicious vehicle. Daniel stared at him. My daughter was standing there. I didn't approach her. Daniel's voice became firm. You don't understand. Oliver looked down. I do. Then he said something unexpected. I was trying to protect her. Everyone became silent. Victoria looked confused. Protect her from what? Oliver looked at Victoria. From Marcus. Marcus immediately stood. Don't listen to him. The detective ordered him to sit down. Oliver continued. Marcus knew Daniel had the vehicle data recorder. Daniel's eyes widened. So, you were following me? Oliver shook his head. No. He looked toward Victoria. I was following Marcus. That changed everything. Oliver explained that he had discovered Marcus was using company security systems to monitor employees. He had become suspicious after noticing Marcus accessing Daniel's personal information. Marcus had been searching for Daniel's home address and Emily's school. Oliver realized something was wrong, so he followed Marcus. He had taken the photograph as evidence. He had never intended to threaten Daniel's daughter. He had been trying to prove Marcus was watching her. Daniel slowly relaxed. But one question remained. Why didn't you tell us? Oliver looked ashamed. Because Marcus had already threatened my family. The room went silent. Victoria finally understood how far Marcus's plan had gone. He wasn't simply stealing money. He was controlling people through fear. The police arrested Marcus for fraud, intimidation, and interference with the investigation. Oliver agreed to provide evidence. The company later discovered that Marcus had been planning to force Victoria out of Hale International. He had manipulated financial reports. He had leaked confidential documents. And he had arranged a vehicle system interference. But there was one final revelation. The police discovered that Victoria herself had caused the actual collision by manually changing the vehicle's direction. That fact could not be erased. Victoria accepted responsibility. She told the investigators everything. She admitted that she had blamed Daniel. She admitted she had lied, and she accepted the consequences. Daniel watched from a distance. He had expected to feel satisfied. Instead, he felt something unexpected. Sadness. Victoria had made a terrible choice, but she had finally told the truth. A few weeks later, the investigation was completed. Daniel's name was cleared. His suspension was canceled. The company offered him his old position back. Daniel returned to the office. But things were different. People no longer looked at him as Victoria's driver. They respected him. Victoria also changed. She stopped pretending she had all the answers. She began meeting employees personally. She created new internal protections for whistleblowers. She returned money that had been wrongly taken from employees during the investigation. Most importantly, she publicly accepted responsibility for blaming Daniel. At a company meeting, Victoria stood before hundreds of employees. "I made a serious mistake." The room became silent. "I caused the accident." Everyone looked at her. "I then blamed someone who didn't deserve it." Victoria looked directly at Daniel. Daniel Carter. Daniel remained quiet. Victoria continued, "I cannot undo what I did, but I can make sure I never repeat it." The room remained silent for several seconds. Then Daniel stood. He didn't applaud. He simply nodded. It was enough. Later that afternoon, Daniel found Victoria outside the building. "Daniel." He stopped. Victoria smiled slightly. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For helping save the company even after I hurt you." Daniel looked at her. "I didn't do it for the company. I know. I did it because innocent people were being dragged into something they didn't understand." Victoria smiled. "That's exactly why I admire you." Daniel looked surprised. Victoria quickly added, "As a person." Daniel smiled. "Good save?" They both laughed. For the first time since the accident, the tension between them disappeared. But the biggest change happened when Victoria met Emily. Daniel had brought his daughter to the office one afternoon. Emily recognized Victoria immediately. "Your dad's boss." Victoria smiled. "I used to be." Emily looked confused. Daniel laughed. "Things have changed." Victoria crouched slightly. "Your dad is a very good man." Emily smiled proudly. "I know." Victoria looked at Daniel. "You're lucky." Daniel smiled. "Very." Emily then asked Victoria an innocent question. "Are you still going to make Dad drive you everywhere?" Victoria laughed. "Actually, I was thinking about giving him a promotion." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What kind?" Victoria handed him a folder. Daniel opened it. Inside was an offer for a senior executive operations position, a major promotion, better salary, better hours, and weekends protected for family time. Daniel looked at Victoria. "You did this. You earned it." Daniel closed the folder. "Thank you." But Victoria wasn't finished. "There is one more thing." She handed him another envelope. Daniel opened it. Inside was a photograph. It showed Daniel's late wife holding baby Emily. Daniel looked stunned. "Where did you get this?" Victoria smiled. "Your wife once worked with my brother." Daniel looked at the photograph. His eyes filled with emotion. Victoria explained that years ago, Daniel's wife had helped Victoria's family during a difficult period. Daniel had never known. That was the final twist. The people Daniel thought had never mattered in his life had been connected to Victoria's family long before the crash. Their paths had crossed years earlier. The accident hadn't created their connection. It had only revealed it. Daniel looked at Victoria. "So that's why you recognize my name?" Victoria nodded. "I remembered your wife." Daniel looked down at the photograph. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled. "She would have liked you." Victoria's eyes became emotional. "I hope so." The two stood outside the building in the afternoon sunlight. Neither of them could have imagined how much one accident would change their lives. Victoria lost her pride. Daniel lost his job temporarily. Marcus lost his freedom. But Daniel gained a new career. Victoria gained a second chance. And Emily gained someone who would eventually become an important part of her life. Months later, Daniel was no longer Victoria's driver. He was the company's director of executive operations. He had his own office, his own team, and more time with Emily. Victoria remained CEO, but she became a very different leader. She listened more. She trusted carefully. And whenever someone made a mistake, she remembered the day she had made the worst decision of her life. One afternoon, Daniel walked into Victoria's office. Meeting in 10 minutes. Victoria looked up. "You're early." Daniel smiled. "I've learned that 3 minutes can change everything." Victoria laughed. "You haven't forgotten that." "Never." They walked toward the conference room together. Outside, London continued moving. Cars passed. People hurried through the streets. Life went on. But for Daniel and Victoria, everything had changed. A crash that began with a terrible lie had ended by exposing the truth. And sometimes, the moment that seems destined to destroy your life becomes a moment that finally puts it on the right path. Daniel had lost his position, then found his purpose. Victoria had lost control, then learned what real leadership meant. And neither of them would ever forget the day a single accident changed both their lives.